You were a federal prosecutor, and I'm
Yes,
sure
ma'am.
understand how things are done at the Justice Department. So here you have these new documents that have surfaced showing that Holder was briefed about Operation Fast and Furious back in July 2010. But that's not what he told Congress back in May. So was he lying?
Well, when you hear the word lie, it includes, and I hate to sound like a prosecutor, but it includes an intent to deceive. So what I would say is it was a demonstrably false statement. And I think Chairman Ice and Chairman Smith are going to invite Attorney General Holder to come back and give an accounting for what is a demonstrably false statement. And there's really no way out of it, to be frank. Either it was an intentionally false statement, or he doesn't read memos from the most senior officials in the Department of Justice, neither of which is a good outcome for the Attorney General. It's either one, you have made a demonstrably false, intentionally false statement to a committee of Congress, or number two, you are too disengaged from the operations of the Department of Justice, neither of which is a very good outcome for the Attorney General.
Absolutely. But, now you have DOJ saying, he misunderstood the question. And I'm asking myself, that question was pretty simple. But couldn't he, if he misunderstood it, couldn't he have said, hey, what are you talking about? Could you be more specific?
Well, that's why, to be candid, you see so few prosecutions for intentional false statements, perjury, because you do have that scienter, that mens rea, that intent to deceive. I was there. And not only did Darrell Issa ask the question, Jason Chaffetz, a wonderful congressman from Utah, asked a follow-up. The question was not complicated. It wasn't a compound question. It was very to the point, and his answer was unambiguous. So the notion that he found out about it a few weeks ago, we know for a fact which can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, that he knew about it half a year before that. Now, there's circumstantial evidence that he knew about it a full year before that. But the notion that you would have a Border Patrol agent killed and firearms be found at the crime scene that were implicated in a federal investigation, if that's the right word, and the Attorney General not know about it is disingenuous. I think if that's going to wind up being his Achilles heel, there are so many memos going back and forth. They're even planning press conferences.
Yeah.
And you mean to tell me that you did not brief? Why is he getting memos from his top deputy attorney general if he's not going to read them?
Yeah. And now you've got Holder staffs claiming that, in these memos, these department officials say they were talking about events that happened before Holder became Attorney General. But you'll look at it, and I know a lot of it's crossed out and blacked out, but they specifically mention Operation Fast and Furious.
By name, and they also mentioned gun walking by name.
Absolutely.
And they also anticipated the criticisms of gun walking, and their defense is apparently, other guns are getting to Mexico, so I guess it's okay for the federal government to allow it to happen. The point I keep coming back to is this is the Department of Justice, not the Department of Obfuscation, not the Department of misinterpreting questions. If we do not have confidence in the administration of justice in this republic, we're not going to make it. And when the top law enforcement official in the United States, which is what the Attorney General is, gives a demonstrably false response to a committee of Congress, there have to be consequences for that. Now, he can come in and dazzle us with fancy footwork when he comes back to join us, but my suspicion is he's going to have a tough time explaining away an unambiguously false answer to a very clear question.
Absolutely. And your thoughts, you mentioned the special prosecutor, chairman of the House Judiciary, now, saying we need a special prosecutor to investigate this. Your thoughts, do you think that's a good way to go?
Well, it needs to be someone who doesn't answer to Attorney General Holder.
Any ideas who you like to have?
I think I'm biased, having come out of the federal system. I like retired judges. I like career prosecutors who have no friends to reward and no enemies to punish. I walk past almost every day an office of a colleague of mine who was embroiled through no fault of his own in the U.S. attorney so-called scandal, where, heaven forbid, a Republican president would want to put his appointees in the U.S. attorney's office. And I couldn't turn on the television a single night without hearing about this so-called U.S. attorney scandal, which happens every single time there's a presidential election. The U.S. attorney leaves and a new one comes. Mm-hmm. And here we have something as untenable and unacceptable as this ill-conceived, botched federal investigation. And other than a few media outlets, and thank goodness for you, you don't hear as much about it. I think this has the potential to be extremely damaging.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, because did you hear what happened to Cheryl Atkinson of CBS?
I believe she was treated somewhat ungentlemanly.
Yes, she was on Laura Ingraham's show talking about it, and they basically, she said, they yelled at me, both the White House staff and the DOJ, and they told her that the Washington Post is reasonable on this, the LA Times, the New York Times, they're all reasonable. But she's the only one who thinks this is a story.
Reasonable is one of those wonderful words that is in the eye of the beholder. And I don't think it's too much for us to ask as just regular citizens that our Department of Justice be beyond reproach. It should be respected. It should be as nonpartisan as possible. This is law enforcement. This is not gutter politics. Thank goodness the administration and the Department of Justice do not get to dictate to us what is newsworthy and what is not. Although I have seen them trying. They don't get to make that call.
Yeah. What do you think the odds are that Obama's going to appoint a special prosecutor?
Is there a number less than zero?
That's what I'm saying, too.
It's not going to happen, but I'll tell you what. Chairman Smith and Chairman Issa, I saw them both this morning. They both appear to be in fantastic health, so their voices are loud and clear, and they're going to continue to call for one. And at some point, we can't just have ATF and the Department of Justice investigating themselves.
Yeah.
Someone who is beyond reproach and has a career as an impartial searcher of fact needs to be in a position to tell us so this never happens again.
So if Obama doesn't appoint a special prosecutor, do you think Holder's days are numbered with this administration?
I don't know. I don't know his relationship with the president. He won't defend the Defense of Marriage Act. He's made the conclusion that that's unconstitutional, even though an appellate court has not. And yet he's very slow to investigate what has been a travesty of a law enforcement investigation. If he and I can't help but think that he does. Call me naive, but I can't help but think at some level, all of us who are former federal prosecutors have enough respect for the Department of Justice and the independence that is necessary for that department, for us to survive as a republic, that he would do the honorable thing and either come in and answer the questions honestly or find another way to participate in public service.
Absolutely. And I know Congressman Issa was on Fox just a little while ago. He had some concerns about a special prosecutor, and it might be slowing down the process of the committee, of your committee, and what they're trying to do as far as investigating this.
Well, Chairman Issa has been around for a long time. He loves to brag that he's not an attorney, but he raises a very good point. You don't want a special prosecutor to then come in and sit on it. Mm-hmm. By the same token, prosecutors have access to grand jury, and they have access to other investigative tools that sometimes congressional committees do not. So it's not going to slow Lamar Smith down. It's not going to slow Darrell Issa down. There are others, and I would hope if anything could be bipartisan, which is a word I hear a lot here. If anything could be bipartisan, it would be a desire to know that a federal law enforcement agency was complicit in violent crimes being taking place in Mexico, and that they would care about the integrity of something we call the Department of Justice.